The Team Never Quit podcast is sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. When it comes to buying a car, Navy Federal knows it's a big investment, and that is why they offer rates as low as 1.79% APR. Learn more at NavyFederal.org. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Team Never Quit podcast. Thank you guys for listening, watching, most importantly, subscribing. We can't say thank you guys enough. Y'all come back every single week to listen to these amazing stories, and we're excited that you're here with us this week. We've got a great guest in store, but before we get to her, we're going to start off with an icebreaker. What is one superpower that you would never want to have?
I would never want to
fly. Is that what you said?
fly. I do not want to fly.
That's funny you should say that, because that one crossed my mind too. I'm not a big fan of jumping out of airplanes and all of that. Flying was one. Immortality. I don't know if I'd want to live forever. Not with everybody else dying around me. I mean, live for a long time is one thing, but now we can get around the whole. I don't want to feel pain, or I don't. I like everything. Yeah, everything that goes with the immortality. You understand what I'm saying? Then die at a nice old age and kind of just. Probably not in my cards, but I'm saying that would be nice. Go ahead.
Yeah, superhuman strength is the one I don't think I would want. It sounds awesome on paper, but then you think about all the favors that people would start asking of you, and I'm not sure I would still have a delicate touch. You know, you're trying to just pick up something small like an egg, and it just like breaks every single time. Like that would be extremely frustrating.
Well, eggs are supposed to break. That's the
well, I mean,
point.
Yeah.
I know. I just walked right into that one. I thought
that's fair. That's fair.
You know what I'm talking about? I mean, you walked right into that one.
All right. John, how about you, man?
I don't think I would want like super hearing, because I don't know. I'm a sound guy. I like sounds. You know, I like to record music, stuff like that. So I have sensitive ears. I think if I could super sensitive what I already have, I think little sounds would annoy me, like a fly in the other room right now.
Or imperfections in somebody trying to create
just like
Can you rip that a little bit? Like I don't hear it.
I don't hear it, but I hear it. I hear like I remember this joke. Les Paul one time, he put a fly inside the mic capsule to mess with the audio engineer, and so there was this little zzz, zzz, and they couldn't find it. And so I feel like life would be like walking around trying to find
all the time.
Like Marcus is saying, yeah.
We talked about telepathy too, right? Like not being able to hear people's thoughts.
Yeah. I don't want to hear people's thoughts.
That'd be a lot.
Yeah, because it's something when you see the expression on their face and you know what they're thinking.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
bad enough.
Yeah, I was like, oh, man, you don't have to say anything. I know what you're thinking.
I don't want to know the details.
Yeah. There's also some joy in that inferring, filling in the blanks yourself.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. The whole people watching thing would kind of lose
It would
same level of excitement. Yeah. Well, we've got a great guest in store. Kara Chamberlain is a public speaker and survivor advocate. In 2002, at 15 years old, Kara was kidnapped and escaped from what she would later find out to be a serial killer. Kara now uses her experiences to speak to groups with the mission of spreading awareness, education, and inspiration. Kara, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Like we were discussing earlier, your story is phenomenal. I literally want to hear all about it. You've identified yourself as a completely different human being down here in the situations that you got into and you got out of. On top of raising a family and being a motivational speaker and literally taking that negative into a positive. That's hard to do.
So it is, and you have to be very purposeful about it. And I think that we all have the ability to do that. And I think sometimes we need the motivation, or we need someone to help us find the steps. And that's a lot of what I do every day.
So let's go back a little bit, starting with the family, like where you were raised, how you were brought up. I mean, that's interesting to me.
Yeah. So I was raised in Lexington, South Carolina. It's a little bit bigger now than it was when I was younger, but not a huge town. And I grew up more or less kind of outside. I had dogs. My parents had puppies all the time. So we had animals around all the time. I was outside all the time doing things like riding go-karts from the time I was maybe 7 or 8, and then dirt bikes and climbing trees and riding horses, and just kind of normal teenager stuff. I was never really told about anything bad that happened. happened, or, if something bad happens, this is what you should do. So the idea of me being a victim of a crime was kind of this vague idea that could never happen to me, right? I think that's a really common thing that a lot of people think, well, that could happen to someone else, but probably not me. So that was kind of my upbringing. I was an only child, so I had no siblings, so I had to entertain myself. But I was always very, very mature from a very young age. So I was always, my dad would say I was 3 going on 30, or I was 6 going on 30.
Yeah.
So.
And what do they do for a living?
My mom she's always done like accounting type work for various businesses. And my dad is a general contractor, woodworker. He works with his hands.
Yeah. All right. So I have a real problem with people who hurt women. So these stories usually freaking kick my butt. All right.
Yeah,
if you see me twitching over here, that's what's happening. They know this already. I just wanted to give you a heads up. All right. So growing up in the Carolinas, you're early teen, right? When all this went down?
Yeah.
Right.
15 years old.
Normal day?
Normal day. Yeah. I had a boyfriend and a best friend, and we were all pretty close between the 3 of us. And so woke up, called my boyfriend, checked in with him, kind of, how's your day? What do you have planned? Let's hang out later, that kind of thing. And then my friend and I called another friend, and she lived at the lake. So very hot here during the summer. So we decided to go to our friend's house at the lake, called my friend's mom, and she asked her mom if there was anything that we needed to do before we left the house, because I had spent the night at my friend's house. And so she asked us to water the plants. I think she had just planted like some shrubs outside. And so she wanted us to water them so they wouldn't die. And so my friend wanted to go take a shower, and I volunteered to water the plants so we could get out of the house a little bit faster. We'd slept in, so it was already kind of midday by this point. So I volunteered to go outside and water the plants. And so that's ultimately what made me a victim of opportunity in this situation.
So did you just walk outside and it happened? Like, was it waiting around, or did it just happen?
It pure just happened. So I was still in essentially what I had slept in. So I was in like a t-shirt from, my mom was working at a car dealership at the time. So I was in a t-shirt from the car dealership she worked in. And I was in, like some cheerleading shorts basically. And so I was out there watering the plants, and a car drove by after I was out there for a few minutes. So he wasn't necessarily waiting there, but he was kind of cruising around looking for someone, and I happened to be there. So that's why I said I happened to be his victim of opportunity.
Yeah.
So I was 15, I was getting ready to get my license, and my mom had let me drive. My mom's boyfriend had let me drive his car, which was a Trans Am. So 2002 Trans Am. And I loved it, right?
Yeah.
I was 15 years old. My dad's a muscle car guy.
Sure,
so, when I drove it, I was like, oh man, I love this car. And so when a Trans Am drove by on the way out of the neighborhood, I noticed it, of course, and just thought, man, that's a cool car. And then a minute or so later, the car pulled back into the driveway, came back into the neighborhood and pulled into the driveway. And so I did not think anything suspicious at first, because I thought, okay, maybe this is a friend of my mom. Let me restate that. I didn't think anything at first, because I thought maybe this is just my friend's mom, someone that knows her.
Right.
And then the guy got out. He sat there, not for too terribly long, maybe a minute before he got out of the car. He got out of the car, and he was a really generic looking guy. He wasn't acting furtive. He wasn't, he had a baseball cap on, but he didn't have it pulled down low, kind of hiding his appearance or anything like that. So no red flags went up. He came over to me and he spoke to me, like in a kind voice, as weird as that sounds. He was not looking around and looking suspicious. So I didn't think anything. He said he had some pamphlets, some magazines, something to that effect, that he was distributing. He saw me outside and he wanted to give them to me. So he asked if my parents were home. I said, this is my friend's house. And he said, okay, well, what about her parents? Are her parents home? And I said, well, no, her mom's not home. And he said, okay, well, I'll just leave these with you and you can just put them inside for her mom when she gets home. And so that was the point that he entered into my personal space. And as soon as that kind of tingling feeling hits you, right, that red flag hits you, I felt a gun pressed to the side of my neck. So as soon as he entered my personal space to hand me the pamphlets, at the same time, with his other hand, he put his arm around my shoulder and put a gun to the side of my neck and said, come with me. And so immediately I said, stop. And he said, why don't you come with me? And kind of, you know, like presses in a little bit more. And so I did. So he walked me to the driver's side of his car with, you know, his arm around my neck the whole time, and opens the car door and puts the seat forward and tells me to get in the back seat, where I see a large plastic storage container, and he tells me to get into that.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. So he says, get in the car. I said, where do you want me to go? And he said, get in. So little did I know, there was a neighbor who actually saw me get into the car, but it looked to the neighbor like just someone that I knew who had their arm around my neck, and I willingly got into the car. So got into the car. He kind of loosely placed the lid on top of the container and backed out of the driveway. And he didn't really say much to me, but I immediately kicked into my survival mechanism, which was, you know, we know it as fight or flight, but I think more recently we're beginning to understand it as fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, or freeze or appease, right? And so for me, I think mine was a little bit on the surface. It was appease. Like, I'm just going to go along with what this guy wants so that he becomes complacent, because I knew that grown men don't kidnap 15-year-old girls for anything other than nefarious reasons, right? Yeah. So I thought, I'll just go along with whatever it is that he wants and let him become complacent, because I will escape. I mean, the whole time that was immediately in my.
So that shotgun in your head quick, right? The minute it started happening, it's like you're formulating a plan. Was it a fear thing, or were you just like, I'm out of here?
It was. So I'm a very strong-willed person.
Right. I got that.
And so for me, I thought, well, I am physically not going to be able to fight this person off. So my fight is going to be right here in between my ears. Right. Yep. And so my fight was appease him, make him comfortable enough with me that I have an opportunity to escape, and then gather information for him. And then gather information about him so that I can identify him when I do escape. Yeah. So that was instantly the plan.
Big guy? Small guy?
Yeah. He was about 5'11" and probably about 200 pounds. Yeah. Not a small guy, but I was 5'4" and like 105, 110 pounds. Right. So no chance of fighting him off.
So initial reaction when the gun was at your neck, not to scream or anything like that, it was just a.
No, there was absolutely no thought process that entered my head. And for a very long time, which I'm sure you will understand how kind of trauma memory and stress memory works, I actually forgot some of those details. I forgot that I went, stop it. And then I went back and read the incident report and remembered that I said that. And I was like, yeah, I do remember that. But again, when you have, a gun pressed to your neck, as we know, reaction is slower than action. So for me, there was no option, because statistics tell you, and experience tells you, that if someone tries to kidnap you and you scream, you fight, you make a disturbance, that chances are they will not take you. But you can't say that, because there's always going to be that one person who would have just shot me right there, right? So there was no other thought about kind of screaming or yelling. My survival mechanism just instantly kicked in, and it was, okay, go with him.
All right. So how long from the time you got into the car and then y'all started driving did y'all stop? Were you tracking? Like, were you thinking? Well, because you were in that box, right?
Yes.
So you couldn't see out of there to see where you were going. Do you have any idea when you pulled out of the driveway what direction and all that?
Yeah, I knew exactly where we were. So I was paying attention to the turns he was taking because I was pretty familiar with the area.
Yeah.
So I knew where we were going, and that was up until I felt him merge onto the interstate. And at that point, I thought, okay, well, there's no way I'm going to know where we are. So I started trying to gather other information. So the first thing that I noticed was there was a serial number on the inside of the container. And so I memorized that. And that was just kind of the first thing. And I didn't know why. I was like, just lock it in, right? Anything I could get into my brain, I was going to identify him with. So he drove for about 10 or 15 minutes probably. And I felt him get off the interstate, and he kind of pulled over after a minute, kind of like off the shoulder of the road, and he took the lid off the container. And that was the time that he put restraints on my wrists. And he also put a ball gag in my mouth, and he told me to scream as loud as I could. And then he went, okay, good. And so he had not spoken to me other than that this entire time. And so he put the lid back on the container. He drove for another couple minutes, maybe like 2 to 5 more minutes. And he stopped and he got out of the car, and I could hear like movement and just like people around, kind of just the sounds of civilization outside of the car. And he told me he was going to get the container out of the car with me in it. And I thought for some reason at that point that it sounded like a gas station, just kind of the amount of noise that was outside, and kind of could hear cars driving by, things like that. And so I thought, well, he's going to rob a gas station and he's going to flee the state. And that was kind of what I thought for some reason. And it ended up being his apartment complex. So he came back to the car after a minute, and he picked up the container and carried it a short way, set it down, and then drug it over. I could tell it was over concrete and then over a threshold and into his apartment.
So he lifted that thing up with you in it?
Yeah. Yeah, he did. Yep.
And you were 15?
Yeah, I was 15.
All right. Strong guy then.
I mean, I guess, yeah, but he probably had some adrenaline as well, right? And so we know that stress can make you capable of some things that maybe you weren't capable of otherwise. So he took me into the apartment in the container, and he left for a second, and he came back and took the lid off the container, and he had changed his clothes. So he had changed into, I think, like a t-shirt and some shorts or something. Whereas before he had been wearing a button down, jeans, and sneakers. And he said, I'm going to take the gag off, but you have to promise me that you're not going to scream or yell. And just remember that the gun, I will always have it with me. I will always have it near me. And so I shook my head. Okay, yeah, I'll do that. And he took it out. And so the next thing that he did is he started taking notes, asking me questions and writing down the answers. So he gets out a notepad and he's asking me, what's my name? What's my address? What's my friend's name? Do I have a boyfriend? What's his name? What's his address? What my mom's address is, my dad's address, and just writing down all of these things. And then he tells me that, he has some rules. And the most important rule that he tells me is that he will always have a gun or some type of weapon, and that my actions will dictate how things go, more or less. So if I listen, there will be rewards. And if I don't, there will be consequences, basically. And so I more or less took that as a sign that my plan that I had formulated was going to be an effective plan, right? So if I was nice and I didn't fight back, then maybe he would allow me to have a little more freedom. So he had written down all of this information, and he was fact gathering about me, but I was beginning to do the same about him. So I was memorizing his apartment. I was there for 18 hours. And during that time, I learned that he was in the Navy. He never told me his name. I tried to read the name that was on his mail, but I couldn't get close enough to read it. I found out from magnets on his refrigerator who his dentist was and who his doctor was. From items that I saw in the bathroom, I determined there was a woman that lived there, not just a woman that had long red hair, because there was long red hair and a hairbrush. And so I was just kind of locking all of this information away. in hopes that it would help identify him. And ultimately it did. I know.
Dude, these stories are heavy, man. That's amazing. The fact that you had the wherewithal to do a recon in the middle of a combat scenario. I trained my whole life to do that, and so did your husband.
Right, exactly.
I mean, maybe some of that rubbed off on him from you. I'm serious.
Most of that before me.
At that age, to be able to go through that. I mean, was there any point in time as you're going through it where it's a fear? Because you know what I'm talking about. Like, so there's fear, anxiousness, there's stress that goes with both those, and there's shifting that around into hey, I'm not dealing with this.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about? And you can actually start to see the weakness because they're weak. Guys who do that crap, freaking weak, man.
Yes, for sure.
And you don't know that. But I mean, they're like scared to death, right? And the minute you throw something a wrench into their gears, they start throwing their whole component off. The fact that you were doing that recon and absorbing all that is an amazing gift.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that, the things we are capable under stress and the human will to survive really just can never be underestimated. Like, we are all capable of amazing things and survival, and sometimes we just don't know what that looks like and how much we're capable of until we're put in these difficult situations.
Sure. That's exactly how that happens. That's how that gets brought out, actually.
Yeah.
You'll never be able to see it unless you get in a scenario bring out I don't want to call it a hardness, but I mean, it's a sharpness. I mean, it's like a resolve, a wherewithal to understand how important your life is.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I maybe would have never known how tough I was if I had not had this situation. My husband and I have conversations now. We actually had a conversation a few days ago where we were just like, we're never going to give up on each other. I don't think. Like, we're just not the kind of people that give up when something is hard, because we've both been tested in these ways that, we've stood ultimate tests. So we get it.
Hey guys, our next partner has a product I've been using literally every single day. I started taking athletic greens because I've had some challenges with stomach problems in the past, just some weird gut health issues that I wanted to kind of figure out. I was looking for some more energy. I was looking to optimize my immune system. And most importantly, I hated taking tons of pills and vitamins, even the gummy ones. Although they're fun and they taste great, sometimes it's hard to just keep up with that. And I've now been using athletic greens probably for the last year. As soon as they became a podcast sponsor, I got my first chance to try it out. I actually had heard about them before on some of my favorite YouTube accounts. And I thought, hey, this is kind of cool. I get to try it too. It is a mild tropical taste. You look forward to it each morning. And I've got to tell you guys what it is. You've probably heard me talk about it before. If you haven't though, with one delicious scoop of athletic greens, you're absorbing 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens, which are all going to help to start your day right. Their special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging, all the things. I know my family gets really excited whenever I get a box in the mail because they know it's probably coming from someone awesome, especially when it comes from Athletic Greens. My sister's the first one coming over, grabbing some of the packs because it really is super healthy. It's great for her family. They've got some autoimmune diseases they deal with their kids, and they feel confident giving it to their kids because it contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals or artificial anything, while still tasting good. It will support better sleep quality and recovery. It supports mental clarity and alertness. It is the one thing with all of the best things. Athletic Greens uses the best of the best products based on the latest science with constant product iterations and third-party testings. And there are a lot of folks out there taking multivitamins of some sort, and it is important to make sure you've chosen the one that has the highest quality ingredients that your body will actually absorb. AG1 is a small micro habit with big benefits. It's the one thing you guys can do every single day to take great care of yourself. And right now, it is time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition, especially heading into the flu and cold season. It's just 1 scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to hook you guys up with a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you need to do is get on your computer, get on your phone right now and visit athleticgreens.com/TNQ. Again, Again, that is athleticgreens.com/TNQ. Take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance.
Well, different
Yeah.
lives down here. You can live different lives, and the challenges that you go through actually perpetuate you and allow you to shift into a different life. Your overall feeling and attitude and the way you drive in life is completely different than anybody else's. Completely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important to remember that we kind of get to decide, right? Like you get to decide if you're going to pick up offense to something or if you're going to pick up strength, right?
Yeah.
And where you're going to go from that, and if you're going to be defined by something that happens to you, or if you're going to be refined by it. And so this is just kind of something that has made me a stronger person, and has made me who I am today. But it's not who I am, right? Like I'm so much more than this story. Yeah,
That's like a snapshot in your life. Like a lot of people, there's something will go wrong. It's like you're going to hang on that, however long that was, as opposed to the years and years and years that you had. All it is it's a sharpening phase.
Exactly. So you asked me if there was a moment where I kind of saw his weakness, right?
Yeah.
So there was a moment when he told me he had to make a phone call, and that was the biggest moment that I kind of broke also. He put me back in the container. He put the ball gag back in my mouth, and then he put the lid back on the container, and I couldn't breathe. So I'm in this container, with a ball gag, and just started having full on panic attack, and was just, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And I thought I was going to die. And so that was the one time that he came in, and I saw kind of this different side of him that I did not see the entire time I was there, which was the fear, right? That someone was going to hear me, or that I was going to die before he was done with me. Right. And so who knows, because he's not here to ask, but thank God. But that was the moment that he kind of also gave me a little freedom too. So he said, "What's wrong? What's happening?" And I said, I feel like I can't breathe. And he said, "Okay, well, if you promise not to make any noise, while I'm on this call, then I will take the ball gag out." And so that's what he did. And then he also gave me a Valium at that point. So, his dose of Valium for my little body was enough to bring me out of that panic attack, and then right back to where I was before, which was this ongoing almost mantra in your head, which, I think there's a lot of knowledge about what mantras can do and how they can kind of keep you single-minded and keep your mind very focused. And for me, that's what it was. And so my mantra was just gather information, wait on it, be complacent, escape. And it was just going over and over and over. And I was also just praying nonstop, like, help me to find an opportunity, help me to see an opportunity when I can't escape.
Yeah. As you're going along through this, I've been in a situation where it's like it's peaks and valleys. Like there'll be a minute there of clarity inside that moment. There is. And then something will happen and it'll go back to despair. As you're running through that, and you're gaining your momentum for your out. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I was there for 18 hours, like I said. And then eventually he restrains me. He puts handcuffs on my wrists and puts a leg restraint on my leg. And the handcuffs are connected to a quick link, which is like one of those carabiners with a screw. And that is tied to a rope, which goes kind of behind the edge of the bed and ties to the frame of the bed, more or less. And then the same with my ankle. So my right leg had a restraint on it. And then, he gets in the bed and he falls asleep next to me. And this is maybe 2 or 3 a.m. And like I said, I had been given Valium, and he had also made me smoke weed. And so I fell asleep. Against all odds, I fell asleep for about 3 hours. And I always expected that when he fell asleep, that would be my opportunity to escape. Because when are you more complacent than when you're sleeping, right?
Yeah.
When are you more off guard? And so when I woke up a few hours later, very early in the morning, I heard him sleeping next to me, and I thought, well, this is it. This is going to be the best time, because there had been other opportunities when maybe he was distracted and the gun was within my reach, where I thought, well, I could do it now, right? Maybe I could fight him, but I thought if I failed, then it's going to be bad. And so I knew this was the opportunity that I was waiting for. And so the first thing that I had to do was get my hands free. And so I tried to use my fingers to kind of unscrew that screw on the quick link and wasn't able to. So I actually had to use my teeth and start the screw. I unscrewed that, slid the handcuffs out of the quick link, and then was able to squeeze one of my hands out of the handcuffs and reached down to my leg, disconnected the restraint on my leg, and then slid out of bed. I was wearing one of his t-shirts at that time. And so found my shorts that I had worn there and went to the front door. This is a really small apartment. I want to say it's probably about 650 to 800 square feet.
Yeah.
Pretty small. And so 1-bedroom apartment. His bedroom was right next to the front door, essentially. His window, the bed was right next to the window, and the window looked out on the front door. So I got to the front door. There's like a little small foyer there. There's the plastic container sitting there. And then there's a coat closet, and it's one of those metal accordion doors, right? They're really noisy ones. And there's just stuff hanging out of it. So the door's more or less barricaded with noisy things. And so I moved the plastic container, I unlocked the deadbolt, and I think there was a chain lock on the door as well. And so I undid all that, unlocked the bottom lock, and then again, stress like makes you do things that you still can't understand. I somehow, all in one movement, kind of pushed everything back in the closet, closed that noisy door, because I knew once I made noise, that was it, right? Like he's going to wake up, he's steps away from me. And threw the door open all in one movement. And I just thought, he's going to wake up. He's going to look out the window first, and he's going to see me running, and he's going to grab the gun beside him and shoot me. I just thought he was going to shoot me through the window. But I thought, you know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if he shoots me, because I'm out of his apartment. Someone will find me. Someone will find him. And so I got that tunnel vision and saw a car, and I can still kind of, my memory works kind of in photographs. So it's like I can see snapshots of different things, and I can still see that photograph of like that tunnel vision with the car. It's a white car driving across the parking lot, and ran out in front of the car, still had handcuffs dangling off one of my wrists, and held my wrist up and said, I was just kidnapped. And I escaped from that apartment and turned around and looked at it. And I said, remember that apartment? There were 2 guys in the car, and they said, what do you want to do? And I said, take me to the police. And so they said, get in. And they took me to the police.
That's unbelievable. I mean, how far was that ride?
It was only about 5 minutes. It was fairly close.
Were those dudes freaking out or what?
Oh yeah, for sure. So check this out. So
I was about to say, I want to hear this, because you know them dudes were freaking out.
Yeah, so this will blow your mind. So like I said, I've forgotten some of the kind of more minute details. And so I would tell this story previously. I'm like, okay. And then we got to the sheriff's department, and we went in, and I filmed a documentary, which I was an executive producer on. And we were kind of going through the story. And one of the executive producers, she was like, you know that you went in by yourself. And I was like, no. I was like, I forgot that. So the guys got there, and it's like a regional, like a department. It's not the headquarters.
Yeah, it's
right?
like an annex or something, right? It's
one of the divisions.
Right.
So they just like pulled up and dropped me off, and I ran in. And so the regions aren't, they're not really staffed. It's just kind of like where they have their meetings and things like that. And so I ran in and ran through and didn't see anything, didn't see anyone, and just kind of heard a voice say, ma'am, can I help you? And I go in, and there's one guy in there. He is a corporal, and tell him, I'm like, hey, I'm Kara Robinson. I was kidnapped and I escaped. And he's sitting there and with this look on his face that I felt at the time was he didn't believe me, even though I'm standing there looking disheveled with a handcuff dangling from a wrist, holding the restraint that was on my leg that I took off in the car. And, obviously he's not disbelieving of me. He's just flabbergasted because people don't run in.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. Right.
Yeah. So it's more a state of disbelief. Right. And so he starts kind of taking my information while I'm still sitting there with the handcuff on and starts trying to look me up in NCIC, which is the national database for where missing persons, stolen cars, weapons, things like that are listed. And it's having some trouble. So I'm sitting there kind of telling him, and he's just, types in my name and pink, types in my name, pink. He's like, I'm having a little trouble. And so he notifies an investigator. And after I'm there for about 5 minutes, he calls my mom, and I hear my mom on the phone, and he's like, ma'am, I have your daughter here. And I hear her voice over the line saying, Kara, you have Kara? It's like, yes, ma'am. I have her here. Come on down and you can take her to the hospital. And she's, I talked to my mom for a minute. I'm like, I'm fine.
She know you were missing?
Did they know?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, she knew. Yeah. So initially, my friend got out of the shower, noticed that I was gone, and called her mom, and then called my mom, and immediately filed an incident report. I was listed as a runaway. Yeah. So I was not listed as a missing person. So there was not the same level of urgency, even though, ultimately there could have been an Amber Alert placed for me because they knew the car that I left in, they knew what the guy I left with looked like. And, obviously I would not have run away. My family knew that. So my mom is on the way there. An investigator responds and he says, would you feel comfortable going back to the apartment complex to try to identify the apartment that you came out of? And I said, well, I don't think I'm going to be able to identify it because they all look the same. I said, but the guys that brought me, they know what apartment that I came out of. And he's like, yeah, they don't know. They didn't remember. It's like, come on, guys. And so get in the car with the investigator. We go back to the apartment complex as expected. Like, they all look the same. I know it's a bottom right apartment. That's all I know. And so we see a man driving around on a golf cart, like works for the apartment complex. Yeah. And I tell him, the guy looks like this, give him his visual description. He's, maybe late 30s, white male, has some facial hair. He drives a green Trans Am. He has a woman that lives there that has long red hair. The inside of the apartment looks like this. This is the layout. He has some animals in there. These are the types of animals. And he goes, yeah, I'm pretty sure I know what apartment that is. So just immediately he knows. So we go back to the sheriff's department where my mom is waiting. And then we go to the hospital to go get a SANE exam, sexual assault nurse examiner exam. And before I even go into the back for the exam, they have a lineup for me. So before they were able to obtain a warrant to get the information for, who he was from the apartment complex, they have taken the information I've given them from the doctor, the dentist, and from the car description and the DMV records, and they have identified him from that information. So they give me a photo lineup. I immediately identify him. My captor was Richard Markovanitz. He had no record really that they knew of. And he was never on anybody's radar as being someone that could be responsible for any of this. They pretty much immediately respond to his apartment. He's gone. They locate some information in there that there's a locked footlocker, and inside of it, there are some newspaper clippings and some things that they think, well, this is a little suspicious. It's about 3 girls in Virginia that were kidnapped and murdered in 96, 97 timeframe. And there's a task force. These are notorious unsolved homicides, never had any leads. He was never linked to them at all. And so they identify the task force, who immediately responds. And much, much later, he does end up being positively identified. So that was in June, and they don't link him until mid-August positively for being responsible for that.
All right, guys, let's take a second to thank our friends over at Navy Federal Credit Union. For over 2 years, they've been supporting all the things that we're doing, helping us put out new great content every single week, and we can't do it without them. When you hear the name Navy Federal Credit Union, you probably think that it is just for members of the United States Navy, and that is not the case. In fact, Navy Federal Credit Union serves all branches of the armed forces. They even serve the families of service members and veterans of all branches. They are the experts in military finances, and they empathize with members' lives and go above and beyond to make sure they don't miss out on financial opportunities for you. Navy Federal Credit Union has done so much to support the veterans in the community by providing great resources to the veteran community, and we're just so grateful for that. When it comes to buying a car, Navy Federal knows it is a big investment, so if you've been thinking about getting a nice new ride, they are going to help you out. They offer rates as low as 1.79% APR on new vehicles, along with the flexibility with monthly payments and terms. And now when you refinance your auto loans from another lender, members could save and get $200. You're going to be able to get decisions in seconds and start saving with Navy Federal Credit Union. Available to members who are active duty, veterans, and their families. To earn and save more as a member, learn more at NavyFederal.org. Navy Federal is federally insured by NCUA. Credit and collateral subject to approval. Rate subject to change and based on creditworthiness, so your rate may differ. Refinance loan must be at least $5,000 to be eligible for the $200. Terms and conditions apply. Learn more at NavyFederal.org.
Yeah, so he leaves his apartment. They're trying to find him, and his sister, so his wife, so he was married, his wife, his sister, and his mother were in Disney World. And so they come back and
oh, by the way.
Yeah, right. And they come back and they come into the sheriff's department. They give an interview. His wife is like, he didn't do it. And just ultimately on his side. By the way, she's 17. So she is, totally unbelieving. And his sister says, well, I actually met him last night in Orangeburg, which was about 45 minutes away. And I got him a hotel room in Orangeburg. And he more or less confessed, said, yeah, I did what they're saying I did. And I've done a lot of bad stuff. I've done more than I can remember. And so police respond to the hotel room. He's gone from there. They begin triangulating his phone. And about 2.5 days after my escape, they find him in Florida, where he's supposed to be meeting his sister. They set up a different sister. They set up a, kind of roadblock. They're trying to catch him, right? So they have the police a stakeout, more or less. And he sees them and he flees before he meets with his sister. A short police chase. They send out stop sticks. They deploy stop sticks and, burst his tires in his car, at which point he wrecks his car, and they send in a police canine that bites him. And at some point between the canine biting his leg, biting his arm, he pulls out a gun and shoots himself right there on the side of the road in Sarasota, Florida. So
good for him.
Yeah. Right.
We got special places for guys like that. I don't know if you've ever heard or read about it, but they go straight there.
Yeah. Yeah. And, to be quite honest, when I heard, I think I didn't hear until the next morning what happened. And when I heard, I was actually really mad. Initially I was really angry because I wanted to sit across from him in a courtroom, and I wanted him to know that he was outsmarted by a 15-year-old, and that choosing me was the biggest mistake that he ever made, that I was his downfall. I wanted him to know that. And then, there's also this side of me that began to realize as time passed that it was the biggest blessing that could ever happen to me, simply because I never had to sit in a courtroom and have all of the details told. I never had to have my character questioned or any of the other terrible things that happen whenever there is any sort of sexual assault case that goes to trial. And my parents never had to sit in a courtroom and hear everything that happened. Right. No. So I went into immediately protecting my family.
Oh, you can rest easy knowing that sucker knew exactly what it was that got him where he was at.
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah.
When you're
yeah.
sitting there and dogs are tearing you up and you go to pull that blaster out, that's the last thing going. Trust me, pure fear, chaos, and now he's in it perpetually.
Right.
It'll never go
Yep.
away.
Yep. I
So,
know.
I mean,
Yeah, even though you didn't sit across from him in a courtroom, like that's what hell is a continuous, everlasting trauma. I mean, and that's what he's going through, is knowing what he did to you, and he will never let it down. So he will be punished for eternity.
so that was in your early teenage years,
Yeah, 15.
and
Yeah.
you just so afterwards, if you don't mind talking about that, so the path back into life, like getting back into your routine, because I mean, you turned it. Well, you didn't really turn it around. You just turned it into something that would benefit and help people,
Yeah. So, when we were talking,
which is
in our
amazing,
icebreaker-
by the way.
Yeah. Thank you. When we were talking in our icebreaker, you said, the ability to never feel pain. And I was thinking, that's what I did. I compartmentalized, right? So I dissociated all of my emotions. So that was how I dealt at the time. But because I was 15 years old, that became my stress coping mechanism long term, right?
Oh,
So
sure, yeah, I
Right.
get that.
So for me, immediately, I go back to life, and I just want everyone to treat me like they treated me a week ago, right? I'm like, I'm still the same person. This did not affect me. I am fine, you guys. I'm just trying to protect everybody else. I don't want my parents to, when I'm giving my statement, I don't want my parents in the room, because I don't want them to hear,
Right.
like everything that happened. And so I just want to go back to life as normal. I want to go back to being a 15-year-old girl. And I had some difficult time going back to school. It wasn't a gigantic school, and people would talk about me instead of talking to me, and that would make me absolutely crazy. But ultimately, for 15 years, I told myself, well, this doesn't affect me. I can go like long periods of time and never even think about this thing that happened. So I thought I was going back to life as normal, right? Immediately. It took me a very long time to learn how I was affected, and that being affected by something that happens is not a bad thing. And so the next summer, the sheriff of the agency that worked my case, he actually ended up becoming a family friend. And so the next summer, he called my mom up and said, would Carol like to come and work for us doing administrative stuff? And I thought, well, that sounds like a pretty good summer job, right? Like, as opposed to a lot of the other summer jobs that teenagers get. And so I went and did administrative stuff, and I worked in victim services. Doing data entry was the first thing that I did. And then I ended up
great.
working.
Yeah, so you get to
at the
read
sheriff's-
and type everything that everyone's going through, right?
Yes, exactly. And just kind of, they were transitioning from paper into, so this is, 2003. So they're transitioning from keeping paper records of everything to a new system. So I'm kind of entering people's notes, lots of different stuff. And the victims assistant side is more of, reaching out to victims, gave them this information, help them by providing this resource, that kind of thing. And so I continued to work in an administrative capacity through the summers at the sheriff's department, all through college. And so when I was in college, if I was able to after school, I did that. And so I worked in the DNA lab there, did administrative stuff. I worked in youth arbitration, which is like kids that get in trouble in school, and trying to kind of rehabilitate them instead of charging them with, like gang violence or fights in schools, things like that. And then whenever time came for me to graduate from college, I was a couple weeks away from graduation and thinking about changing my major, because why not? And
right.
so I went to the sheriff and said, I think I want to change my major I want to be a teacher. And he said, well, have you ever considered being a school resource officer? You could go to the academy, you could kind of combine these two things that you are interested in. And I said, yeah, I'll try it, because I had grown up in the sheriff's department, right? So this is my family. This is my second family. I'd worked there for, 6 years at this point, basically. And so I went to the academy, and it turns out I really liked law enforcement. I remember I grew up riding go-karts and out in the country, and my dad taught me to shoot guns. So I go to the academy and I'm driving on the driving range and shooting on the shooting range. And I'm like, oh, I really like this. And so I worked in law enforcement, and Worked there up until the birth of my first little person.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. And through all this, when you say, hey, I want to get back to normal, I want things that's I understand that part. You're like, you don't want anybody to feel sorry for you because you're on it's amazing how it shifts around to that protective. You become an offensive weapon as opposed to a defensive weapon. And
Right.
if your family's not used to that, they think something's wrong. But
Right.
like I caught something you said earlier when you're like, hey, some of the things you go to is not a bad thing. Like the
Yeah,
situations that you
absolutely.
get in, I mean, it's a situation. God put that down there. It's a lot of people will pray for something, and they'll get in the scenario that gives it to them, and they'll pray to get out of it. I'm not talking about yours in particular,
No,
but
yeah.
if you look at it as some people like yourself get in those spots, man, people, I mean, just looking at you. First of all, looking at you and then hearing that story, they don't go together. You're tracking that? All right. Yeah. What I meant was that it's the power that comes out of you. You're like, hey, a lot of times you see something, if it's been hurt like that or if it's been attacked like that, it does irreparable damage.
Mhm.
But then if you see something that doesn't, that get hit it the opposite way.
Yeah.
I had no idea what he grabbed a hold of.
Mhm.
That's right.
I
That's
mean,
right.
like a stick of dynamite, a grenade, whatever it was, he had no idea.
No,
And
not at all.
and the fact that scenario perpetuated that and brought you
Yeah.
into this world of law enforcement to save. That's just amazing. That's amazing to me. I mean, I know how hard that is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think that's why it affects me like that because I see people all the time crumble and crack.
Right.
Hell, I get my face kicked in all the time, and it's difficult.
Yeah.
But you just
And I
keep.
mean, every situation is going to be difficult in different ways, right? So I think that we all have, when I was in school, when I was in college, I graduated with a major in psychology. And I remember learning about the antithesis stress model, which basically says we all wake up every day with a certain level of stress, right? So a scale of 1 to 10. You may wake up on an 8 and I may wake up on a 4 and then you may get into a car accident and that may be, like a half of a percent of stress for you, right? And that doesn't do anything, but it may stress me out so much that I crumble.
Sure.
And so we all kind of are created where we can handle different stress and we respond to stress differently. And so that was kind of eye-opening for me because when I did go on to work in law enforcement, I had a hard time when I was working in victim services because there would be people.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you. That's kind of what I was going with
Yeah.
that.
But not because of the reasons that I think most people would expect. It was difficult for me because there would be people that would go through some of the worst things that you could imagine. And my job was to reach out and offer them services, right? How can we help you? There are lots of funds that we can pay for counseling. There's a lot of things that can be done. And so I would reach out to these people that have been through the worst of the worst. And they would say, you know what, I'm good. I just really want my life to go back to normal. And then there would be people who had gone through something much more minor in comparison. And those would be the people who would be like, can you pay my electricity bill? Can you pay my mortgage? Can you do? And I had a hard time with that because I had been through something hard and I was not the kind of person it was hard for me to ask for help.
Sure.
Because I didn't need it, right? I didn't need help. I use the air quotes when I say that, right? And so that was the hardest thing in law enforcement for me. I also, for a while, I was an investigator and I investigated sexual assault and child abuse cases. So I was more or less in the SVU unit. And the other hard thing about being in law enforcement, when I was in that unit, it was not the cases. It was not that I would get these cases and they would make me feel any certain kind of way, right? Because when I tell my story, it's like telling someone else's story because it was very much an out-of-body experience for me.
Yeah.
It's just so tightly compartmentalized that it would not activate any emotions, but it was more of everyone trying to protect me, which historically has been the biggest thing for me. When people are like, oh my God, you must have so much trauma and you have to go to counseling, or that response of, I'm so sorry that happened to you, right? Like you mentioned that a couple of minutes ago. You don't want people to feel sorry for you. So those were the things that were difficult for me in law enforcement is, they my supervisors would not give me certain cases because they didn't want them to trigger me, right? So I was constantly getting protected, and that was the hard thing for me in law enforcement because I wanted to work. I wanted to go and do those cases.
Sure. It's more like them protecting themselves from some kind of.
Well, it's got to be like a healing layer every time you are able to help another case. And those kind of cases, even though they're super traumatic, that you've been through that and you know how to help. So if the guys are trying to protect you, it's like, no, I actually can handle this. And I know I can help them.
I'm actually the one that's here to protect you, not the other way around. So you know what I'm talking about? It's like, she's the one with the qual and the guys, I understand that. That happens a lot, actually.
Yeah.
But, so as you progressed in the learning environment that you're in, as opposed to what kind of catapulted, what advice do you get? Like if we have kids, what do you say? And does that change? I mean, is there some things like this, because the streets change, the predators, they change, right?
Yeah. I think the biggest threat right now to kids, honestly, is online stuff, right? Like online predators. And if you look at statistics and what we know about sexual assaults, a stranger kidnapping and sexual assault is actually very uncommon. But when people ask me for advice for children, and when I think about my own children, so I have 2 boys, and I mistakenly for a while kind of locked myself into this trap of, well, I have a little bit of time. They're still young and they're boys, so I don't have to worry as much about boys as girls. But really the statistics are almost neck and neck for female versus male sexual assault percentages in the United States. It's 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men. So it's not a huge difference. So most of the advice that I give parents especially is to have that open communication and the open dialogue with your children so that they know that you're always a safe space, to use correct anatomical terms, because you don't want there to ever be any confusion if someone does something that's inappropriate, right?
Yeah.
And to teach your children how to do 2 things, how to set boundaries and how to respect boundaries, right? So how to say no about their body and how to respect other people's no's. Because now the flip side of it is I am raising boys. So I obviously don't want my boys to be victims, but I also don't want them to be offenders, right? Which is a hard thing to admit, I think, as a parent, that we don't want our children to also be offenders. So as simple as when they're, little, like 2 years old, and, we're tickling them and they're having so much fun and they say, stop, then we stop, right? So like, these are easy things to do, but it teaches them that they have autonomy over their body. And then that lets them know kind of what is right and what is wrong. And ultimately, if something bad happens to our children, we can do everything we can to protect our children. But when you talk about how traumatic something becomes, it's in the gap between what happens and how you're able to deal with it. So the best thing that we can do to protect our children is give them tools and give them resources to deal with anything bad that happens, and let them know that, like, I am a safe space. I am never going to love you any less because of anything that happens. And I will never get mad at you if someone else does something, even if they tell you that you're going to get in trouble, or, if you feel like you made a mistake, I will never get mad at you. And so I think ultimately, those are the best pieces of advice that I can give parents for children. Because I think, especially when I was younger, we were told, stranger danger, right? But stranger danger is not the biggest threat to most children right now.
Yeah.
How did your family handle everything with you? Were they like that when you came back? I mean, were they just overbearing on being super protective, or did they give you some space?
Yeah. So, a little bit of both. My dad is kind of stoic. He's not as much now that he's getting older, but at the time he was kind of stoic. So I think that he just kind of let me kind of lead whatever I wanted. My mom had, everyone and their brother and sister telling her, well, you have to get her in counseling. You have to do this. You have to do that. And my mom was actually very wise about how she handled it, because she was like, well, she doesn't want counseling. She's like, maybe, we've talked since. She's like, maybe I should have made you get counseling. I'm like, no, you absolutely did the right thing. Like, it was my choice. I've never felt like that was the right path for me for my healing. But there were some moments, especially like fairly, what's the word I want? Let me go back. There were some moments like not long after I escaped that my mom was a little overbearing. I remember one time in particular, I said, I'm going to go, to my boyfriend's house and with my friend, and we'll be back like later day or whatever. And she said, no, you can't go. And I was like, okay, so I'm fine. And a week ago, this would have been okay. And nothing has changed as far as me. So I'm going to go do the thing that would have been okay a week ago. And basically, more or less, in my teenage smart aleckness, told her that was her problem. So I don't necessarily advise that, but, it was true though. I mean, like as an adult, I can look at it and be like, well, that was her insecurity, right?
Yeah.
Well, you had to grow up too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, something like that makes you, age is ranked for sure, but then experience and an age can separate those.
Well, and now as a mom, you can see why your mom was scared for you to go anywhere with friends or whatever. Yeah. But it is good that she allowed you that space, like for the counseling. I was a teenager that was forced into counseling, and it didn't work. It backfired, because when you're forced to do something you absolutely don't want to do, the teenager's just not going to do it. They're going to shut down, and you're going to end up resenting your parents or whoever's making you do whatever it is you don't want to do. And they think it's healing because we're conditioned that the only way to heal is through therapy, and at the time the only therapy was going sit in an office with someone with a legal pad and asking you about your, tell me about when you're 5 years old. I'm like, what just happened had nothing to do with when I was 5 years old, so I get that. And that makes me super happy that your mom gave you that space and that freedom to heal how you needed to heal.
Sure. Cause I mean, that could, if you think about it, that could have gone the opposite direction. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you come home, your parents put you in your room, it's like being captive.
Yeah, exactly.
I never thought about it, but I could see it.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I have, people that reach out and ask me all types of questions now. And that is one of the things that when family members ask, how can I support my loved one that has just gone through something traumatic? My answer is always like, let them lead, like, let them know that you're there to support them, and don't force them to do anything, because you're exactly right when you say it's like holding them captive. Like, one of the biggest things that you can do to support someone in transitioning from a victim to a survivor, and ultimately someone who is thriving, is to let them understand that they have the power within them to become a survivor, and they have, they know their body and they're able to make choices for themselves. So ultimately that's the best thing that you can do to support them. So, like, right on track.
Amen.
You're an incredible inspiration.
Yeah, your strength is something.
I was listening in the other room. I was a little late, so I was listening in the other room, and then I got to a point where it's like, okay, I have to go in there. So I'm sorry for the late burst in, but I'm Marcus's wife. I'm Melanie, and I'm super inspired by you.
Thank you. I think, I had a hard time for a very long time talking to people about what happened, and not because it was difficult, but because of what we mentioned earlier, where it's that I'm so sorry that happened. And I didn't want people to feel sorry. But also people would say, wow, you're a hero. Like, you're so strong. And I was like, I don't feel like I'm any of those things, because I was just surviving. And I think very often, when you're doing what you have to do to survive a situation, to you, it doesn't really feel that extraordinary, because you're like, I was just getting through, right? Yeah. I was putting one foot in front of the other and getting through it. And so to me, it just feels like what we all can do.
Right. But the inspirational part and something for you to think about is it's not that you just survived and had a family and moved on. It's that you went and helped others.
Yeah, one more time. That's why.
Like
That's why we're here. I mean,
that is what like makes a huge difference between survivors and heroes. Is you actually taking the initiative. I mean, you could have just gone to college, getting your psychology degree, and done whatever. Like, and you would have helped people in that too. But working for law enforcement and actually going like right to the source of, reliving basically what you went through other stories. That's what's heroic.
Like taking that hammer and being like, you didn't finish. Watch this. This is what I'm turning into.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I thank you for that. I see that, and I will have to somehow accept that maybe that's true. But I've always felt like what happened to me happened for a reason. I hate the cliche that everything happens for a reason, because I don't think that's true. But I think that if we are careful, we can find reason in a lot of things that happen to us. And so I always felt like what happened to me was so I could help other people. And it's looked a little different over the years in different places and different spaces. But right now, what it looks like is putting out a lot of content, and specifically, primarily through social media. I do keynotes as well, where I go and do a lot of law enforcement keynotes, especially. But reaching people through social media has been such a blessing, because I can actually be right there authentically documenting my process and my healing, because I will say the majority of my healing has actually been within the last 5 years, and we're almost 20 years since this happened. So I've been documenting that and helping other people to see what it looks like to heal from trauma, and that there are many different paths, right? It's not just the therapy model. There's a lot of different ways that we can heal and we can process. And there's a lot of ways that we respond to trauma, because I think a lot of people see me speaking historically and they think, oh, well, she handled that so well. It's like, well, that was my coping mechanism. I just locked it in a box, right? So is that the most ideal way to handle it? Probably not. I mean, I don't know, but it's how I survived. And so letting people see what that dismantling looks like, and then helping people to find ways to support survivors in their life, and then working directly with law enforcement to give them the tools and the words that they need to empower victims to move into survivorhood. Because for me, that sheriff of the agency that I went on to work for, he is a very big part of the reason that I count myself as a survivor today. So we have, the agency that was from Lexington, where I was taken from, versus the agency from Richland, which is where I was recovered from. And you have one sheriff who told me the day after I escaped, well, that guy was going to kill you, right? Like, you should be dead right now. Versus
that's awesome. That guy's something, right?
Right. I mean, which was it true? Yes. But at the time, my captor had told me he was going to let me go. We had no evidence at the time that he was a serial killer, so we didn't know. Versus the other sheriff that, gave me an award for outstanding bravery. He helped me to make contact with the two men that took me to law enforcement and let me help him present them.
Yeah, the guys that didn't remember where their apartment was? Do you still talk to them?
No. So turns out they were criminal. Turns out they were criminals.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they had criminal records, but that doesn't negate someone being a helpful part of my story. So no, they have not been in contact with me since. But he very much, encouraged me to take my strength back. And so I do a lot of work with law enforcement, giving them the words to help them understand that just because you're in law enforcement and you are responsible for prosecution, that doesn't negate the power that you can have in helping someone become a survivor. So that's a lot of what it looks like to kind of take this negative. I mean, it's hard for me to even say that, but to take this negative thing that happened to me and move it into a positive. Sure. Because, I did handle it fairly well. So how can I use it to empower other people?
But, and I mean, that's one of the biggest things that gets overlooked with law enforcement. I mean, they enforce the laws that obviously we write on the books. That's gets overlooked a lot too. But it's the pass down. When you get into a situation where you need them, they've been in it, and the words that they send to you or say to you, a lot of times it helps.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I use that comparison of the two sheriffs when I do keynotes very often, because I think in law enforcement, it's very hard to remain compassionate.
Yeah.
Right. Like, because you get so hardened, you're really dealing with the worst people, right? Like, nobody calls you when they're having a good day.
Right.
They call you when you're having a bad day. So I think that very often they forget that just because something is true doesn't make it necessary to say to a victim, right? And just because he was going to kill me doesn't mean that I needed to hear that at 15 years old, less than 24 hours after I escaped.
Yeah.
So, there's words that they can say, and just something as simple as them saying, you know what, I believe you. Thank you for feeling safe enough to call law enforcement, or, thank you for sharing that with me. Like that's so empowering. And it doesn't turn things back to the person that's speaking, right? Because that I'm so sorry that happened to you response, who does that put the focus on? That puts the focus on the person that's speaking, and not on the person that is sharing, who has just gone through something difficult. That turns the conversation and kind of the onus of the conversation back on the victim, because they have to say, no, it's fine. Like, I'm fine, or it's okay. Like, how unfair is that? So just small little nuances in language is a lot of what I do with law enforcement, teaching them how to just kind of change those things, because they can make a huge difference, because
Sure.
very often they're the first people that victims are in contact with, right?
Well, most people don't know what to say.
Yeah.
No,
They're just
they
trying
don't.
to say something to help in any way they can, and when they send it out, it could just be not what you wanted to hear,
Yeah.
and their most compassionate moment. That's
Yes.
tough. That's
Well, like the guy,
Human
the
condition.
officer that said, you should have been dead. Like, he was probably in so much disbelief that you were
Right.
alive. Like, that's all he could think about. But when you really dissect that, that's really giving the power to the douchebag that did this, and
Yeah.
it's taking it away from you, where the
Absolutely.
attention and the compassion should have been on you. He just didn't know better. It wasn't probably an intentional thing that he did, but through your teaching with the law enforcement, it just teaches them to not give the power to the aggressor by making a comment like that, like especially to a 15-year-old, but it doesn't matter if they're a 40-year-old. I mean, it's any victim doesn't want to hear like, you should be dead. Like, maybe
Right.
later on you can really think about that, and obviously, yes, I probably should have been dead, but to hear it within 24 hours of the incident.
yeah. In the beginning, sure.
Yeah.
Towards the end of it, it just makes what you accomplished that more amazing.
Yeah, but at 15, like,
Yeah, I'm sure. I understand that.
that is, and dudes don't really think about that. Like, it's just, I'm around them all the time. Like, not just my husband, but just like
Yeah.
guys.
She got an SF husband too. She knows what I'm talking
Okay,
about.
like very alpha guys. I can just like picture any of their reactions if something happened. They'd be like, damn, you shouldn't be alive right now. Like, and it's not this intentional thing. It's just how
Right.
they think. But if they know that they shouldn't say that, they wouldn't. And
Right.
so that's why that's super important and awesome that you're doing that to help future victims, because there will always be victims.
Yeah.
And
unfortunately.
for law enforcement, how to handle that. And even like friends and family, like if we know somebody that we don't know how to respond. And I mean, I just bought a book the other day, Caregivers for Dementia, because my grandma's going through that, and I don't know how to handle that. I mean, if there was a book on how to handle a victim, or how to, like, we would read that when something happens to someone.
Maybe there will be.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that needs to be out there, because no one wants to intentionally hurt a victim's feelings by the things that they say when they think they're being compassionate or whatever, just comforting right after an incident. It's that lack, like Marcus said, that we don't know what to say.
Well, you give hope.
Yeah.
Like when someone comes in with a situation that they've been in, they see you standing there, and the attitude is the jovial kind of, hey, we're gonna get through this deal. Man, that'll put a book to shame, right? I mean, it's just when you have something you can latch onto.
Do you know Angela Rose?
Do I what? Sorry.
Do you know Angela Rose?
Yeah.
Okay. We just had her on the podcast. And she does training for law enforcement as well. And I love that. I love that that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I genuinely think that people are doing the best that they know how, but when we know better, we do better, right?
Sure.
So that's been a big part of what I'm doing. And I am writing a book, and
there's
been a lot of back and forth. Yeah.
Go now.
Yeah. There's been a lot.
Because we're going to promote it on here.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're still in like the proposal process, but that would
well, we're ahead of schedule then, Kara, and we're just fired up.
That's right.
All right, cool.
Okay. But that is a big part of what I want my book to be, because I don't want to just tell my story. I've told my story, right? And that's not who I am. I want my book to be something that survivors can pick up and they can glean inspiration and hope, but families or loved ones can pick up and they can see how to support someone. Yeah. Like, what are the tools? What are the things that we can do to
that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, most people write the book about how you get through it and to get
which
the advantage.
Which is also inspirational.
Like, absolutely. Well, my point, what you said was that the ones that they're around, it's for them. That's great.
It's for everyone, right? Like I didn't want to pigeonhole it, because I wanted, one of the people that we were talking with about a book, he said, if I had a daughter who I found out had gone through something, would you see this being something I could pick up to learn how to support her? Absolutely. Like that ultimately, the more we talk about hard things and the more we have hard conversations, the less uncomfortable it will be to have hard conversations, right? So like vulnerability and authenticity inspire vulnerability and authenticity. So it's my hope that by me being out there and being open and talking about what I've been through, that it will inspire other people to share if they feel comfortable, but it will make, anyone who has someone disclose something difficult, that it will make them feel less uncomfortable, and it will give them the tools to support other people. Because listen, the statistics they're super high. Yeah. They're super daunting. The chances are very good that every single person that hears this at some point in their life, if they have not had someone disclose to them that they have been assaulted, that at some point you will have someone disclose. Mm-hmm. And so, it's just anything that we can do to support people. I think that's my goal. I want to make as many survivors as I can and help other people make survivors.
I actually know someone, I don't know them super well, but when I met them, they confided in me about a story, and I'm not going to say who it was, but what was so crazy, and it was a crazy story, crazy kidnapping story. Her family didn't believe her, and the police didn't believe her. And so she never really told anybody. And I was affected by that for a long time, because I'm like, how? You never got comfort. How can you not believe your daughter or your friend or whatever? Like, I just don't understand that even happens.
And I think, like, as a survivor, I just see when you hear people say, oh, she made that up, right? She's not telling the truth. I think, why would someone make that up? Yeah. Why would someone lie about being sexually assaulted? Like, if you actually start breaking that down in your head and thinking about it, it's like, that is one of the worst things that can happen to a person, and to lie about it. I just can't ever imagine someone lying about it.
Yeah.
Honestly.
And I truly felt like empathy for this person. Like, I felt like she was telling the God's honest truth, and it hurt so bad to hear her tell her story and that no one believed her. And I'm like, how do we help people like this? Because that is just so sad. And how do we go after, because she knew who the aggressor was, like, how does he get punished? I mean, the guy's still going free, and it drives me crazy.
And, from someone who used to work in law enforcement, I can tell you the amount of offenders who actually serve jail time, it is like shockingly low. It's like single digit percentages. So one of the big messages that I give people is that your healing has to be inside of yourself, and it can't be dependent on a prosecution, a conviction, jail time, because it is just unfortunately the way our justice system works, and the way investigative tools work. It is very hard to prove a sexual assault to be true, enough to make a judge and jury believe it. Because even if there's evidence, right, like in any story, right, so especially true in an investigation, in any story you always have at least three sides to the story, right? You have like what one person feels is true, what the other person feels is true, and then somewhere in the middle you have the real, right? And so how do you in an investigation prove what really happened when you have two people's perspectives of what happened? And that was one of the difficult things for me, which was why I ultimately ended up leaving investigations, is because I would have all of these cases and I would have to close so many of them because we could not take them to court. There was just not enough evidence to make a judge and jury believe it, and then ultimately, get a conviction. And so for me, I was getting, 15 cases in a day, and I would close 5 of them and then have 10 open cases. And the next day I'd get 15. And I just had this gigantic case backlog. And it was so disheartening. It was so difficult for me, that I felt like I don't even know how to make a difference. So
as an investigator, did you believe
you make a difference by believing people?
Yeah. Did you believe, as the person investigating or just having the information of these cases, that the victim was telling the truth?
Always. I always believed it. And I was very lucky that I had an amazing training officer in investigations, and he gave me a tool that I take and I teach to other law enforcement now, which is difficult for some people in law enforcement. But I would tell people this line that I got from him. His name's Travis, wonderful, wonderful human. It's, I believe what you're saying. Now it's my job to get enough information to make a judge and jury believe what you're saying beyond a reasonable doubt, beyond a shadow of a doubt. And then when I'd have to close the cases, I would reinforce that, right? I would say, I believe you, but unfortunately, I can't get enough evidence to make a judge and a jury believe you. And so I was very lucky that I was given that tool very early on, but absolutely, I always believed it. And, there were other investigators that would get cases. One that pops into my mind specifically was a young girl who, it was more of a date rape situation at a party. Somebody had slipped her something. She had a non-consensual experience, but she had lied to her mom about where she was, right? Yeah. And another investigator was like, well, you're not going to be able to prosecute it because she's already established she's a liar, basically. And he's like, you have to close the case. And I was like, absolutely not. But that's the way our justice system works. Yeah. And as frustrating as it is, if you were accused of something, or if your son were accused of something, you would want him to have the benefit of the doubt, right? You would want the justice system to work the opposite way, right? Like you would want your son to be able to defend himself, as opposed to it just be, the word of the victim. So it's difficult. There's no good answer. There's no good solution. And that's why, the best thing we can do is just believe people. And I think in law enforcement, that was difficult because a lot of victims would portray in their mind that just because you believe them, it means that there's going to be a prosecution. And so it's just walking that fine line in law enforcement in my experience, of letting them know I believe you, but it's not in my hands ultimately.
Yeah. Well, they'll be punished at some point. I truly believe that. Like the karma will get to them at some point.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. Thank you again for telling us all this.
Yeah.
Of course. I truly believe that the more people hear these conversations and the more we have these difficult conversations, the more people will be able to heal, because they're getting better support. They're sharing things that they've never shared before. And, like you said, there will always be victims. So as much as we can make people into survivors, that's how we make stronger people. And that's how we make a stronger community and a stronger world. And boy, do we need it.
Yes, for sure.
So how can we support you? How can our listeners follow you? What can we do to help out? Get the book online? Just
Yeah. So I have a documentary that I was an executive producer of. It's out right now. It came out in the fall. It's called Escaping Captivity, the Kara Robinson story. It's on the Oxygen Network. And so you can view that streaming online. I am in the process of writing a book. I don't have any more details for that yet, but in the meantime, they can follow me on social media. I'm on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. That's all at Kara Robinson Chamberlain is my handle. I have a website, KaraRobinsonChamberlain.com. I keep everyone apprised of what's going on. I'm most active on Instagram, really.
okay. Well, thank you again for your strength.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I would imagine that our paths will cross again for sure, just to keep up and see what you're doing, especially when your book comes out. But never lose that fire.
Yeah.
Tell your husband thanks for his service. Thank you for your service as well, and just being. It's tough. We don't put this in here, but let me tell you something. When you go through something like that, it ain't no joke. I know you know that, and I mean there are things down here that are so strong that you can't even see it till the scenario presents itself. And the fact that you took that and you just kept going with it from the very beginning, from the time they put you in there. And I mean, coming from a soldier to another one. I mean, you can see it in you. Just well done. Well done.
Thank you. I mean, like I said, I really think that when you're in those moments, you do what you have to survive. Like, as crazy as it sounds, like I remember when I was in the academy, we heard a story of a deputy who was shot. He was chasing after somebody, came around the corner. The guy was standing there and shot him like in the head with a .22. And he walked a mile to where his walkie-talkie had signal and called in the description and was just like very calm. And I remember hearing that in the academy because the guy came and spoke to us. And I thought, wow, I don't know.
Right? I don't know if I can handle it.
I'm like, I don't know if I was shot in the face, if I'd be able to walk a mile and calmly describe. And then I was like, this is what other people feel when they hear your story, right? Like, I don't know if I'd be able to do that. And that's the lesson, right? Like, you don't know. You don't know what you would be able to do, which is, one of my pet peeves when people are like, oh, I could never. I'm like, first of all, you don't know what you could do.
Right.
Because the will to survive, the strength to survive is just something that can't be underestimated.
I mean, I think we all say that.
Yeah.
You still get, when you go into it, like, well, I couldn't make it. There are things that I've been in. I look back, I was like, oh, I couldn't make it through that. Right. And I was the one that did it, right? You know what I'm talking about?
Right.
And
like
that's
if somebody were to tell you your own story, you'd be like, man, I don't know
about that. That'd be that's happened to me as well. That's a phenomenon, right? It absolutely is. It perpetuates what you're doing. It's like that's how you've gone out of the gauntlet, right? You've
right.
You got a hold of it, and you're like, man, I don't know if I could do that. You've completely come back around to yourself, which is a blessing. Yeah, that's a good way of saying that. I never thought about it like that, but that's good stuff, Kara. Nice work.
Yeah, thank you for being a light in this world.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for saying that.
You're welcome. God bless you. Take care.
Absolutely. Thank you. You too.